Queensland, which trailed for two-thirds of the race, has now registered its 26th consecutive win in a row.
A redundant tautology from Channel 7, followed by a redundant football commentator on the ABC.
Dean Bell can't stop him getting the ball away, and as I said, Rodwell, he's been up everyone's bums all afternoon. I mean that in a possible way, Warren.
Perhaps we'll see the back of him now. And from Townsville, the world's smallest giant groper.
The Queensland groper is one of the largest of the reef fish. It can grow to a size of about 3 metres and weigh up to half a kilogram.
Good evening. A clutch of much the same in print. From the Adelaide Advertiser.
Police were seeking an old brown Falcon station wagon yesterday following the murder of an elderly woman on Saturday.
The public are warned not to approach the vehicle. And more from police rounds. This from the Woolgoolga Advertiser.
A 20-year-old Woolgoolga man was charged after he allegedly pawned a television.
Not his first offence either. The Age carried this advertisement.
So, if you've had enough of the rat race or wish to retire, call the business analyst.
Don't call us. The ABC, we regret to note, still hasn't got to the bottom of its quality control problems in TV news and current affairs, and some of them are basic indeed. Who would believe, for example, ABC News asserting that something was the largest in the Southern Hemisphere? But they did.
Much of the aviation world has touched down in Melbourne this week for the biggest air show in the Southern Hemisphere.
That sort of writing was a joke 30 years ago, but the story itself was even worse.
The Russian fighter is the envy of its Western counterparts, few of which can match its breathtaking manoeuvres.
The idea of envious aircraft possibly springs from those whose reading stopped with Thomas the Tank Engine. But wait, we've got more, and still from the same story.
Also at Avalon in force, the Indonesians. Australia's closest and most sensitive neighbour.
Bernard Bowen, an ABC national roundsman who hasn't heard of Papua New Guinea or Sir Julius Chan. Not so hot. Then there's Michael Gleeson, an ABC foreign correspondent, to whom the criminal justice system is also obviously foreign territory.
But one poll, which may be significant, shows 70% of American lawyers believe this case will end in either a hung jury or a not guilty verdict.
The defence is having a tough time establishing OJ's innocence.
No, even in Los Angeles, there's a presumption of innocence, Mr. Gleeson. It's up to the prosecution to prove guilt. And another howler from the same story.
The case is far from over. So far, it's cost taxpayers over $2 million, and regardless of the outcome, is almost certain to go to appeal.
Regardless of the outcome? No. If Simpson wins, there will be no appeal. Surely. The 7:30 report's production values aren't much chop either. For a Paul Lynham three-hander on Wednesday, the studio director made a complete hash of it, hopelessly disorienting the poor viewer. Lynham on the left, Senator Curnow on the right, and Roy Morgan inserted between them. Then Lynham asked a question of someone to his right, but it was answered by Cheryl Curnow looking away from Lynham. Remember, the introductory wide shot showed them sitting the other way round. Confusing, isn't it? Then a question to the man on the studio wall.
Gary Morgan, what do you say?
Well, my opinion doesn't matter, Paul. What matters is what the people want.
And to finish, a hasty reorientation, just to confirm the 180-degree muddle.
And it's about time that we had the people deciding, not the members of Parliament.
But let's have an informed vote, Paul.
Cheryl Curnow, Gary Morgan, thanks to you both.
And still considering the 7:30 report, we remind you of that splendid satiric treatment of tabloid current affairs shows, the too close to the bone Frontline.
I've actually got a story here. I'll bring it up. I'll just bring up the folder.
Yes, Mike.
Wait a second. No, hang on. I'll praise it, okay? It's illegal textile factories employing migrant women and paying below award payments.
Another area that researched well, not surprisingly, is romance.
Mike Moore wasn't having much luck in pitching his story about sweatshops, but he made it anyway and submitted the story to his executive producer.
It could well be a scene from China or Korea, but this sweatshop is operating right here in Australia.
Unknown to Mike, the story was reworked, jazzed up with some sexy fashion footage. It came as something of a surprise to him when it went to air.
Well, they say clothes maketh the man, but in Australia's fiercely competitive fashion industry, it's women who maketh the clothes. Here's a Frontline exclusive.
It could well be the workrooms of a Paris or Milan fashion house, but this factory is operating down under.
Where's Brian? Brian?
Life, at least at the 7:30 report, imitates art.
They're called out workers, the hidden army behind our clothing manufacturing industry. And a report released today by the Textile Clothing and Footwear Union paints a shocking picture of exploitation. It's a $10 billion industry, trading on an image of sophistication and quality. Today's report by the Textile Clothing and Footwear Union seriously dents this image. It reveals the bulk of our clothes is being made by a workforce that's underpaid and overworked.
Fatally short memories. And here's a quite different problem for the 7:30 report. Or is it a problem to be resolved at a management level? It's about Quentin Dempster and ABC Television's National Investigative Unit. That unit, generously resourced and with considerable research capacity, was set up to attract stories from whistleblowers and to make those stories for use on the various 7:30 reports. Stories like this.
It began in late May last year as the Griffin Venture prepared to empty 2 of its massive oil tanks for repairs. This is the oil processing platform's most hazardous operation. In a process known as gas freeing, if air is pumped into the tanks before highly flammable hydrocarbon levels are reduced to less than 2%, the mix of air and gases could quickly become explosive.
In this case, the whistleblower was a BHP ship's officer concerned about safety practices on a Northwest Shelf oil platform.
Can't you do what you are told? The master then walked away from me. What happened next is in hot dispute. Vish's version is that only because he broke ranks and took his concerns direct to the field superintendent was the gas-freeing operation called off that night.
To be frank, it really wasn't a television story, but better suited to print. Still, the ABC spent, we reckon, tens of thousands of dollars researching and producing it. Concurrently, the Australian had the same story, precisely the same story.
If air was to be pumped in before hydrocarbon levels were reduced to less than 2% by volume, the mix of air and gas could quickly go through the explosive range.
Back to the ABC investigative unit.
He went ashore to Dampier, where the BHP Dampier manager began an immediate inquiry. Vish's allegations were declared to be unsubstantiated, and his claim that the Griffin Venture had been in jeopardy was declared to be groundless.
The newspaper article?
An inquiry by BHP's Dampier manager had declared Vish's allegations to be unsubstantiated, and his claim that the Griffin Venture had been in jeopardy was declared to be groundless.
I know what you're thinking. Outrageous plagiarism by the Australian. But it isn't. The author of the newspaper article was
Quentin Dempster, head of ABC TV's investigative unit.
And Dempster was paid for his contribution to the Australian. What was it that he sold them? Not just his rewrite, but all that expensive research, not the property of Quentin Dempster. Mr. Murdoch got a bargain, a substantial story, tens of thousands of dollars worth of work, the property of the ABC, done by ABC staff, and all for $400. That strikes us as improper, and it's not the only time it's happened. Dempster also sold the Australian this rewrite of the ABC unit's story on tax reform.
We found one brave academic, Professor John Neville, prepared to go public with a heretical call for an import tax of around 2.5% to raise up to $2 billion.
Tonight, he urges the federal government to impose an across-the-board import tax.
I think we could tax imports, not protective tariffs, but a revenue tax at low level, say 2.5% on all imports of merchandise.
And it doesn't stop there. One member of Dempster's research team is Bruce Donald, formerly an ABC in-house solicitor. Donald reported for Dempster's unit on defence spending.
Our spending has bought us more big weaponry than all those ASEAN neighbours combined. But could we keep Australia safe into the future and spend less? A former senior defence official is emphatic that we could.
Savings of the order of $2 to $3 billion are a perfectly reasonable target.
This time it was Bruce Donald, who we note in parentheses was an applicant for the job of ABC Managing Director, who sold the ABC's story to a newspaper, in his case, the Financial Review.
Former ASIO chief and Defence Department Deputy Secretary Alan Wrigley is again crossing swords with his old chums in the military over his details of how to save up to $2 billion a year while keeping Australia just as safe.
It strikes us that neither Donald nor Dempster should be entitled to recycle ABC research for their personal gain. And consistent with that, we don't see that their editor, Chris Anderson, should be entitled to authorise them to do it. But he did. Quentin Dempster sits on the ABC board, so it should be pretty easy for him to obtain a ruling on the question. Now that's enough for the ABC to be going on with. Let's look elsewhere. At the remarkable Amanda Lulham, a sports reporter for the Telly Mirror. On the same day she published her interview with a cyclist about to race in southern New South Wales, she covered netball in Tasmania, a men's triathlon on the Sunshine Coast, hockey in Perth, a women's triathlon on the Sunshine Coast, and yacht racing from the Falkland Islands. Perhaps AAP should have been given the credit. And perhaps the noted American photographer Herb Ritz, who took this picture of actor Jack Nicholson for Rolling Stone in 1987, should have been given the credit for Sydney Weekly's Andrew Denton, NEC's laptop ad, and Westpac's credit card ad. Indeed, we'd like a break from magnifying glass portraits, whether of Helen Wellings or Spike Milligan. Last for this week, bad news for Mr. David Rutledge from International Business Asia. The story is about a deal between the Queensland Sugar Corporation and Vietnam.
The corporation's chief executive, Mr. David Rutledge, will be shipped next month to Ho Chi Minh Port for refining.
Oh, we're sure Mr. Rutledge is already sufficiently refined. Good night to you.